Stretching lazily in the comfort of my warm bed, half covered by a cozy blanket, I quietly observed my wife, Riley, through half-closed eyes. She was up at the crack of dawn, just as she had been the day before. In the dim light, dressed in nothing but a thin robe that barely concealed her figure, she kept glancing back at me, making sure I was still asleep, as she rummaged through the closet, picking out her outfit. After 20 years of marriage, Riley should have known that I'm a light sleeper. Despite that, we've had a pretty good life together. We raised our daughter and set her off into the world. She's an independent young woman now. My wife and I both work at the same factory. She's in the HR department, and I drive a garbage truck. Sure, the job might be a bit grimy, but it's decent pay. Believe it or not, you can find some pretty valuable stuff in the trash sometimes. And on top of that, it's thanks to the factory that Riley and I got our personal lives in order. My dear wife had been working in HR for a couple of years when a young and dashing guy decided to join the company. And as you might have guessed, that was me. It would have been a sin to let such a golden opportunity slip away, especially when it came in the form of a stunning brunette with a figure to die for and legs that could stop traffic. I couldn't take my eyes off her. While she was busy filling out some paperwork, blushing at my compliments, I made up my mind right then and there. This woman was going to be mine. And when Matthew decides something, he follows through. Less than a year later, I led my bride to the registry office, where I slid a hefty gold ring onto her slender finger. Over the years we spent together, I've often marveled at how lucky I was to have her. Trust me, finding a woman who's easygoing in life and wild like a panther in bed isn't easy. Although I'll admit, I wasn't exactly a novice in that area before I got married. Whatever the case, my wife and I lived together for many years, and I've even got a few gray hairs of wisdom to show for it. All that time, she never gave me any reason to doubt her fidelity. But it seems that good fortune only lasted until yesterday. Just the other day, I took a short vacation at the factory to patch up the leaky roof of our cozy house. By that time, Riley had already had plenty of rest, spending some time with a friend, basking in the sun by the sea. You may be wondering why I didn't join her on this trip. Well, the answer is simple. Nothing compares to the pleasure of rocking on a boat with a fishing rod in hand, enjoying the beauty of sunrises and sunsets. And if you have a flask of bacon to go along with it, well, that's just perfection. Let those sea voyages to distant shores be the adventure of others. I'm content with my simple pleasures. However, when Riley returned from her resort getaway, something about her seemed different. Perhaps it was the southern sun and salty sea air that had such an effect on her. She became even more attentive and eager to please, her eyes sparkling with an unusual brightness. Naturally, I was thrilled by this transformation and secretly hoped it would never fade. But yesterday morning, I started to feel like something was off. It all began when, after nightfall, my wife slipped out of the house dressed in a way that was, to say the least, uncharacteristic. Riley had always been meticulous in her choice of outfits, yet there she was, wearing a chic short dress that left very little to the imagination, showing off her strong, shapely legs. I pretended to be fast asleep at the time. An hour later, she quietly returned, checking to see if I was still in dreamland. Without missing a beat, she changed into her usual nightgown and slid into bed beside me. All day, I debated whether I should directly ask where she had been sneaking off to at such an intimate hour. But in the end, I chose to play the detective and catch the cheater, as they say in the act. It was becoming clear to me that my darling was shamelessly cheating on me. So, today, when I pretended to be making something, I noticed my wife pulling on her graceful, slender legs a pair of very revealing stockings, and over them a tight red skirt that hugged her figure. She complemented this dress with a stylish white blouse. In this outfit, my darling looked more like a slutty schoolteacher than a faithful wife. With one last cautious glance in my direction, Riley quietly slipped out of the room, closing the door behind her. With lightning speed, I jumped out of bed, pulled on trousers and my favorite t-shirt with inscriptions, and jumped out the door after her. There she was, strutting down the moonlit street in high heels, her hips swaying gracefully with each step. Keeping a low profile behind some bushes, I tailed her, already fantasizing about confronting my rival and giving this unfaithful woman a piece of my mind. Soon enough, Riley veered off the road and ventured deeper into a small forest. A narrow path led to a tiny railway station, but as far as I knew, no trains were scheduled there at that hour. So where could my wife be heading? The answer came soon enough. Approaching the small waiting room, with only one window lit, Riley gently tapped on the glass with her lacquered nails. While I was peeking out from behind a massive oak tree, eyes wide with shock, she slipped through the door that opened just a crack before it slammed shut behind her. But despite how quickly the lovers moved, I still caught a glimpse of who welcomed my wife inside. A burly, bearded man in a blue uniformed shirt. It was Luke, the station master. That scoundrel. I fumed. I just lent him my chainsaw yesterday so he could chop some wood, and now I'd like nothing more than to chop him up into kindling. With rage boiling over, I marched toward the building, ready to confront the adulterers and demand they explain themselves. When I reached the window, I was floored by what I saw. There in plain sight, this hefty guy was doing things with my wife that you wouldn't even see in the most explicit adult films. And then something snapped in me. Instead of breaking the window and teaching those bastards a lesson, I found myself unable to look away. To my shame, I must admit, I was actually enjoying what I saw. And without really understanding why, I pulled out my mobile phone and started recording everything on camera. The video, I have to say, turned out quite well, running for about 50 minutes. But as soon as my wife began getting dressed, I sprinted back home faster than a bullet, not wanting to get caught. Once home, I wanted to dive back into bed as quickly as possible, but then I noticed my wife's phone lying on the coffee table. Just at that moment, the screen lit up with a message notification. It's probably her lover expressing his gratitude for the pleasure he just had, I thought, snatching up the phone. However, it wasn't Luke at all, but that same friend with whom my wife had gone to the seaside. And that's when everything became clear from their chat history. As it turned out, Riley had been suffering from a lack of male attention for a long time, although I tried my best. So much so that even a young man would struggle to keep up with my pace. It just wasn't enough for her. Her fiery nature demanded much more. For 20 years, Riley had endured, never straying. But as she entered her 6th decade, she realized she couldn't bear it any longer. So, following her friend's advice, she turned to a lover for relief. But here's the kicker. She praised me so much in that conversation that I nearly teared up. You might say I should have condemned her or dragged her name through the mud, but in that moment, I forgave Riley completely. But then suddenly, the door in the hallway creaked. In the blink of an eye, I returned the phone to its place and slipped back into bed. Just a few seconds later, my wife quietly entered the room. Peeking through slightly opened eyes, I saw her standing in front of the mirror, admiring her reflection. Oh, if only someone could have seen the satisfied and joyful look on her face. How she had blossomed. Earlier, I had wanted to confront her about the betrayal, but now, I couldn't even bring myself to admit that I knew all about her escapades. When Riley started changing into her nightgown, I cursed her in my mind, practically demanding that I kick the scoundrel out of the house I built with my own hands. I even thought about publicly shaming her and filing for divorce. But I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. And all because I now desired Riley more than ever before. As soon as my wife got into bed, I immediately, pretending to have just woken up, pinned the astonished woman beneath me. I was determined to make her relive all the pleasure she had recently experienced with her lover. Yet to my surprise, she eagerly accepted my advances, once again proving to be an incredible partner. Gently squeezing my large hand with her small palm, she whispered faintly, with deep gratitude, "Matthew, you're amazing. We've never had it like this before." I responded with a smile. It'll always be like this from now on because I had no idea what my wife was truly capable of. Soon, we fell asleep in each other's arms. From that day on, our life took on a new meaning. I kept the recording for a long time because it reminded me not only of my wife's passion, but also of my own. Riley's little affairs on the side quickly came to an end. They were no longer needed. Oh, guys, pay close attention to your wives, and you'll see. They'll have energy only for us, their loved ones.